Everybody, I have a video here for you today. First, I'd just like to say thanks to all you people who subbed JJ and Ben's channel. I thought that was really cool, the response that video got, and I'm sure they appreciate their new subs. And also from Puka J, Luke, I posted his new channel on my other channel list, and you can find that on my main page. I have had a lot of questions, like on my credentials, or what does your experience come from as a researcher? Well, I have no credentials at all. It's just my own research. People think I'm like an expert on history. I'm not. I haven't made a lot of videos because I know a lot about ancient history. I know a lot about ancient history simply because I made a lot of videos. And try making over 1,000 videos, and your way of thought is going to change, I guarantee it. Now, most of us have heard of the Hall of Records of the Books of Thoth coming down from a previous time in Egypt, and the ancient Egyptians, which they say themselves are just a legacy civilization of something that came before, and many associate that previous civilization to Atlantis. And maybe the monuments at Giza tell a story that you haven't heard before. But what most of us think of as the Hall of Records, and I just think that's a grandiose way of saying just some written text that came down from this previous time. But a lot of that is associated with under the paws of the Sphinx, or in front of the Sphinx, or in some way associated with this monument here, that in the ancient text is called the Great Shrine, the great god Anubis. And of course there's the Edgar Cayce story, and when I first heard about Edgar Cayce and the claims, I thought it was a fairly ludicrous idea, or I just thought it was a far-fetched story. And then I read a few books and I was just dumbfounded. So I really don't have an answer for the Edgar Cayce story, but I found it fascinating. But the Hall of Records and the paws of what we call the Sphinx, and I think it was Anubis, simply because they name the temple in the most important chapter of the most important ancient text. They name this temple the Temple of Tep-2F, Anubis upon his hill. Anubis is the only god allowed to be shown at the entrance to tombs. I originally thought it was a lion, and that takes nothing away from Graham Hancock's work. I think his alignment with the pyramids in the Nile is all you need. And if I had not read Fingerprints of the Gods, you would not have ever heard a word from me. But when I originally thought it was a lion, I went in search of anything from the early Egyptians that it was a lion, from the tombs, the text, the symbolism, the alignment especially. That's talked about a lot, Leo. Well, I couldn't find a darn thing, and I later came to realize the alignment is all about this. This is the most important artwork. Coming from tombs, this is the weighing of the heart, equal balance of light and darkness, good and evil. The Sphinx is aligned to the rising sun on March 21st. What we call the Sphinx today is aligned to the sun, the rising sun on March 21st, the day of equal light and darkness. And here they even show you it's about the Sphinx with a little Sphinx right here facing east. But I've been stating for 3-4 years that any archive that was here, any records from a prior time, was probably discovered way back in Egyptian history, maybe even pre-dynastic history, because there's always been people around here and probably always people curious. But do we have evidence? Just a little bit of text saying that something was found here 5,000 years ago roughly from the second dynasty of Egypt. And remember, the Egyptians themselves, their king's list goes way back earlier than the first dynasty. I think that is important to restate so all you people know that. It goes back thousands of years. How many thousands? Well, that's all up for interpretation. Now, there are museums in Europe that house ancient Egyptian artifacts and text and papyrus. This is the Berlin Papyrus, and some theorize that this proves the ancient Egyptians knew about like the Pythagorean theorem a long, long time ago, and this is claimed to be from the Middle Kingdom. And this video isn't about what the mathematics are of this, but I will leave links below because it's pretty interesting. Now, I have no problem with this being recopied in the 12th or 13th dynasty, like it states when this was written. But as a lot of Egyptian text, it was written on much earlier documents. And I came across this in Ignatius Donnelly's book on Atlantis that was written in 1882. And this pretty much floored me. And let me just read. Now, I was reading Ignatius Donnelly's book on Atlantis, and this was written in 1882. So this is prior to hardly anything known about ancient Egypt, and some of the dating is inaccurate, and some of the names here I was a little confused about, but this is kind of making sense. It says, the Papyrus of Berlin states that it was discovered, rolled up in a case, under the feet of an Anubis in the town of Secum in the days of Tet or Thoth, after whose death it was transmitted to King Sent, and was then restored to the feet of the statue. King Sent belonged to the second dynasty, which flourished 4751 BC, and that is off, and not a lot was known about the dating of Egypt back in 1882 when this book was written. And it says, and the papyrus was old in his day. So it says, in the second dynasty, the papyrus was already very old, and a lot of papyrus were recopied by later dynasties, some many times. But when I read that it was discovered in the feet of an Anubis statue in the town of Secum, I almost fell off my chair. What is Secum? This is the Secum scepter, and this is associated directly with the underworld deity, Anubis, who guarded the sacred necropolis. The town of Secum clearly was Giza here. Now, Ignatius Donnelly refers to a King Sent, and this is the closest one here. It's written a little differently, but it starts off S-E-N in both of these cases, Sendi and Senj. So this is probably the one it is referred to, this king here, and that comes from the second dynasty, when I still say an Anubis statue was at Giza, and I think it was destroyed or defaced or beheaded about 4,200 years ago. But in Ignatius Donnelly's research, it says, under the feet of an Anubis in the town of Secum, which I'm thinking is pretty much Giza in the days of Tet or Thoth. And then it says the papyrus, already old in the second dynasty, was restored to the feet of the great statue. This has just been bugging me. Are they talking about something that was restored here in the feet of the old Anubis statue? And you know what else was found in the what they called the Berlin Papyrus? It wasn't just math. It was medical formulas and more. And Thoth or Thoth is supposed to be the god that passed down all this knowledge. And I just found this really interesting because Ignatius Donnelly would have no idea about the Anubis and Sphinx connection. And Secum is no town I have ever heard of. It was a symbolic way of putting it to the writers coming from about 5,000 years ago. Secum, a place of power and directly connected to Anubis and the underworld. And the Sphinx sits right in front of those tunnels that go deep underground. In my research, for whatever that is worth, the only evidence I could find for the original form of this monument was, as it is called in the ancient texts, the great god Anubis, the great shrine, lord of the divine booth, and if you look up booth, enclosure is one of the first definitions, and in Pharaohs' Tombs, the knowledge of the mighty priests, who were really the powerful ones in Egypt, their knowledge, when in Pharaohs' Tombs, this is the Anubis, from Tut's tomb, and Anubis is really displayed in all the Pharaoh's tombs. And I'm going to take you out at the end of this video with about a 2-minute video I made a few years ago. It's worth resharing for new subs. But what does it say in Tut's tomb about Anubis? It says, he who is upon the secrets. He is upon the secrets. And also said, he is upon the box coffin of Orion, guarding the gates of heaven. And isn't that a perfect way to describe what we see today on the Giza Plateau in a very symbolic fashion? What we call the Sphinx today is right in front of that shaft that goes way down and has that mysterious big sarcophagus down there. and used to have a few more in what we commonly refer to as the Osiris shaft, and certainly he could be considered upon it. It says, upon the box coffin of Orion, and Osiris and Orion are certainly intermingled. When Ignatius Donnelly wrote that, really nothing at all was known about Egypt, and he was just reporting. Was something actually found here in the Second Dynasty? Well, I find that very interesting. If they found it in an Anubis shrine and it was very, very ancient, really, this here is the only thing that fits. And those in search of a lion are perplexed why the greatest monument in Egypt, right in front of the tombs, isn't shown in any of the tombs. Well, I'll show you at the end of the video. It certainly is. But I have reported on the Great Monument being Anubis. I've also reported on some ancient records possibly being at Giza. Well, that one line from Ignatius Donnelly's book kind of connects the two, and I was dumbfounded when I first read it. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized I was going to be making a video about this. But hope you thought that was interesting. What is this grid all about on my Google Earth here? You probably haven't seen that before. Well, my next video, we're going to go find Atlantis. So, I hope you thought that was interesting. And you all have a very nice day.